So today is Memorial Day 2019, and I just want to do a video in honor of my dad. Not my biological father, but actually the father figure who I came to know and love later in my life, and who I call Dad. And he has passed on. Unfortunately, he died last year in August, and now this is May of 2019, so he hasn't been gone for yet a full year. I'll do my best to not get emotional in this video. I really want to honor him, and he was a very disciplined and loving person. And to honor him today, I would like to read from my book in full color, because he actually wrote the foreword to my book, which I really appreciated, because not very many people, even those who said they loved me, did anything very substantial to really support me when my life was really uprooted and the whole world was kind of calling for my head on a platter. And he stepped up and he did something to kind of stick himself out there too, to support. And he said that's what a dad does. So I'd like to read the foreword to my book by Albert Wilkerson, Jr. I was born in 1938 in Birmingham, Alabama, which was one of the most segregated cities in the country at the time. I have vivid memories of the city's strict segregation laws and how they affected me as a child, being barred from whites-only restaurants, told to sit at the back of the bus, forced to drink from colored water fountains, and obliged to step off the sidewalk to allow white people to pass. When I was 5, my father took me and my 3-year-old brother to a theater that was open to black people for just a single viewing each week, The Late Show on Thursday evenings, and we had no choice but to sit in the balcony. For every other show, the theater was reserved solely for white people. The show my father took me and my brother to ended so late that the buses and trolleys were no longer running, forcing us to walk home. My father chose the most direct route, which happened to go through a white neighborhood. He held our hands as we walked, and when a shadowy figure emerged from beneath a tree, I could feel my father's grip grow tighter. Then came the ominous words, "What you doing in this neighborhood, boy?" It was a white police officer. My father told us to look straight ahead and keep moving. We walked past the officer, but could hear his steps gaining on us from behind. When the officer caught up to us in the light of a street lamp, he issued another challenge and grabbed my father's left shoulder. My father let go of our hands. The officer raised his billy club to strike him. Pow! The sound reverberated down the street. The noise was shocking, but not as much as the realization of who had delivered the blow. My father had slapped the policeman so hard I could see the imprint of his hand on the man's face. The policeman fell to his knees. In the blink of an eye, my father pulled out his pocket knife, opened it, and held it to the man's throat. "We're on our way home from a picture show," he calmly explained. "We aren't bothering anyone. I don't want any trouble, but if you harass us anymore, I'll cut your throat." My father grabbed my brother's hand in mine and swiftly led us away from the officer, who was still down on the ground. I half expected a shot to ring out, but there was only the echo of our footsteps. Because of that incident, we had to leave town, and we had to leave quickly. The next night, my father took us to the train station, where we caught the midnight train to Chicago and safety. By so doing, we became part of the Great Migration, joining millions of other blacks as they moved from the South to the North in search of better paying jobs and fewer lynchings throughout the 20th century. The North served as a launch pad to a better life for me. When I was 17 and living in Detroit, Michigan, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps and went on to serve in Vietnam. After I returned to the States, I joined the San Diego Police Department, but found my true calling in academia. For 19 years, I taught in public schools, community colleges, and as a guest lecturer, and that role brought me a great deal of happiness. While I may have been able to flee the racial discrimination that was so common in Birmingham when I was a child, it continued to haunt me throughout my adult life. I did my best to combat racism with the most positive attitude I could muster given the circumstances. tasked with this daily chore, I also came to appreciate others. Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and my father, Albert Wilkerson Sr., to name a few, who by their example and by the power of their convictions fought racial bias and prejudice. Rachel Dolezal is also such a person. I first met Rachel while she was serving as the education director of the Human Rights Education Institute in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Observing her teach children, I saw that she was inclusive and dynamic and a true advocate for every student who attended her programs. One of her duties was to educate people in North Idaho about the Black experience, and in the process, she embraced her own African spirit in what was a very toxic part of the country. I saw this special spirit in Rachel in everything that she did. It was obvious to me that she was an activist for humanity. I was impressed. Largely because of Rachel, I became a volunteer at HREI and got to know her and her son Franklin, and later Isaiah and Langston. As I grew close to her and she became like a daughter to me, I didn't place a lot of emphasis on her ethnicity, and I certainly didn't spend any sleepless nights worrying about what her biological story was. She looked Black and her vibe felt Black, but that's not what drew me to her. It was her work. What she was accomplishing was much more important to me than what color she was. Yes, I saw her as Black, but it wouldn't have mattered to me if she were German or Swedish or Chinese. I simply accepted the way that she presented herself to the world as a racial and social justice advocate, and in addition, admired her amazing artistic talent. In June 2015, the media outed Rachel as a white woman who was passing as Black, using a photograph of me and the fact that she called me Dad as some of their main pieces of evidence. Two reporters, one from the Spokesman Review and one from People magazine, approached me and asked me if I was Rachel's biological father. I told them no, but that I had lots of daughters. What do you mean, they asked. There are people who call me Dad who aren't biologically my children because that's how we do. It's a cultural thing. They didn't understand, and I declined to do any more interviews after that. That both of Rachel's parents were white was news to me, but I was hardly upset about it. What upset me was that all the work that she was doing was suddenly in jeopardy as her parents, employers, and colleagues all rushed to throw her under the bus. I didn't want any part of that. If this country had more people like Rachel who were concerned with doing good things for people and achieving equity for all, it would be a much better place to live and raise children. In Full Color, her book, is not just an engaging look at one person's journey of self-discovery, but also an important tool that should be studied in classrooms and homes across the United States. It offers a unique opportunity to reflect on the complex social construct of race and racism in this country from the perspective of a young woman who has personally experienced their profound effects from both sides of the color line. Having been a national delegate for Barack Obama in Idaho in 2008 and 2012, and having worked in support of human rights and racial and social justice, I believe Rachel's book will help cast a light on some of the most pressing and divisive issues that exist in this country today, namely social inequality and racial prejudice. Albert Wilkerson, Jr. Again, that is the foreword to my book in full color. This is my personal copy, which actually doesn't have the dust cover on it, but inside the dust cover is, of all the books, is a orange hardback, and so this is what it looks like inside of the jacket. Anyway, I just wanted to read from some of his own words today, since I do miss him a lot, and I know that my kids miss him as a grandfather figure, and he just always imparted so much important knowledge to my students when he would come to my classes at Eastern Washington University and share his experiences in the military, and how he actually had 3 attempts on his life by his white subordinates because he was a Black senior ranked officer and a drill sergeant in the Marines, and that during a time when, you know, the civil rights movement was in process, but before all of the desegregation had actually occurred. And so he really had a lot of courage, not only in the military to face that system and the prejudice and bias within that system, but also later on to actually come back to the United States and become a police officer in San Diego after the Rodney King beating and the riots, and a lot of the black officers walked off the force, and he really felt like black people with character needed to step up and be the police in the black neighborhoods themselves to ensure the safety of black citizens. And so he stepped up to do that and experienced a lot of racism within the police force, which then caused him to step away from that role and later move into public education in high school, teaching, and also lecturing at community colleges and doing a kind of traveling Buffalo Soldier presentation that he really loves to do in full regalia of like a traditional historic Buffalo Soldier uniform, as well as doing those presentations on horseback. So one of my fondest memories is when I launched the first Juneteenth celebration in North Idaho as the Director of Education for the Human Rights Education Institute there. And I partnered with him because I wanted his Buffalo Soldier presentation to be part of that and have a lot of history involved in the event. And he also brought his big, huge grill, and we had barbecue chicken, and we had just, you know, a great feast, a lot of side dishes. He loved to cook, he loved to cater, and he made amazing food, which we both also shared that. He also liked to paint, so we had that in common too, and loved to study history and talk about it. So we had a lot of things in common. It was just kind of a natural fit as, you know, more than friends, we were family, and he will continue to remain in my heart forever. So I want to honor him today and just, you know, thank him for everything that he gave to me and to my children and to everyone else whose lives he touched, because I know that he touched a lot of people. And I'm not going to edit this video, even though Langston, of course, hopped up here at one point, and you can hear him in and out of the background, but I think that my dad would be totally okay with that, because the last words I heard him say just a couple hours before he passed away was, "That little boy," because Langston was running around his hospice bed, and he loved kids. So, and he loved Langston and all of us. So just want to put this out there to honor him. And also, I do hope that you know, you get a copy of my book to have that very kind of condensed short story of his life in that foreword, if nothing else. Even if you're not a reader, that's a very short story, and I think it's a poignant one for times today. And I know that he was just a relentlessly hopeful person, and really always believed that things are going to change, that things are going to get better. And I want to continue the fight, you know, in his honor, just because I too believe that as long as we're living and breathing, you know, we have to do our part. So, so I'd like to also just share some pictures of my dad with you. And this is just a short little sequence that I hope you enjoy that kind of captures different parts of who he was.